So, your database is used so you can store data and recover it piece by piece. Like you have a list of customers or a list of items for sale, and you want to query the information about one customer or one item. So, SQL, XML, and LDAP are the most common ways to do this on the server. SQL injection used to be the number one vulnerability in web apps. Most data was all stolen from it this way. I think that changed a few years ago when Amazon Cloud Services put up these web buckets, S3 web buckets, and a bunch of people deployed huge databases on them, and by default they were just public to everybody, and people didn't know that. So there was just a ton of open Amazon buckets, which I think turned out to even be a bigger security problem. But aside from that, for your cloud services, it's databases that were so easy to steal the data from. The attack is easy and very powerful. So the fundamental problem here is the same thing you've done in the early projects here. Quick explanation of LDAP. LDAP is Microsoft system, lightweight directory access protocol, and it's just a way to structure data to go over systems. So when you log in to Active Directory in a Windows domain, it sends information formatted in LDAP over the network. It's just a way to format the data. All right. And I think that's all I know about it. Yeah. Anyway, so the fundamental problem here is you have an interpreted language. Instead of being compiled like C, it's executing line by line, and you use one language to create a line of code, which is then reinterpreted by another language. This is like having a part of your company that says something in English, but then have it run through a translator like Japanese for the next part of the company to obey it. It's likely to have something bad happen at the point of translation. Python is, yes, normally interpreted. You can compile it, but that's not normally how it's done. And so you saw the ping form before. The problem here is this is the code written in PHP, and the code takes data from the user here in AC, and it adds it to a string, ping minus C2 space, and then the data from the user, and then it uses that as a command line to execute in the bash command shell. So data from the user is used to create a command line, which is then interpreted by a different system. And that means you can put something here, which is a valid string, but which turns out to have unexpected results here. All right, now compiled languages don't usually have this problem because the code is all fixed. And the data is typically not misinterpretable as code, although we're doing it in the 127 class. There are situations like a buffer overflow where you can exploit compiled code, but you have to exploit it at the binary level with assembly code. You don't get to put in high-level stuff like bash commands normally. Yeah, like printf and such. All right, so here's the point. In SQL, you'll have a command like this: select star from users where username is Marcus and password is secret. This would let you log in only if you have the right username and the right password. But if you put in admin apostrophe dash dash, then it will be select star from users where username equals admin and the rest of it is ignored, and it doesn't matter what password you put in anymore, and that was the demonstration I did last week. That was a way to log in as admin. Now, if you don't even know the name of the administrator account, this is the attack I used, the more general one, where you put in this apostrophe or 1 equals 1 dash dash in the username, and now it'll be username equals null or 1 equals 1, so it's always true. So you will get the whole database if it's possible that you can get many answers, or you will just authenticate as the first user, which is typically the administrator. And you can use union, as we talked about before in the SQL injection project. This way you can combine two select statements, so you can insert a select statement even if you only control the text in the username. So here's the part of the query the developer put there. Here's the name that you inserted, and by putting in an apostrophe union select one, there are now two select queries. The first one selects name from employees where name equals Sam, and the second select query just selects one. So the results, the first query has no results because there is nobody named Sam, but the second query has a 1, so you get one row of an answer 1. But the point is you're now able to inject an entire select query even though you were only supposed to be able to put in a name. So at the end you need a comment character unless you carefully construct your injection to not require one. And I find, depending on the language, a type of SQL they're using, you might need any of these, a pound or a double dash or a /*. That's common that you have trouble because you're using the wrong comment character. Now, if you're going to use this union trick where you have one query here and another query here, select queries, it will give you an error unless they have the same number of columns. So, and they also have to have the same number of fields and data types, although a string can take a number can't take a string. All right. So if you have the wrong number of columns, or if I have name equals Sam union select 1, 2, then it won't give me any answer. It'll just give me an error message. The use select statements have a different number of columns. You can't add 2 columns to 1 column. All right, you can add different data types if the fundamental result is string. Since I'm getting a name from employee where name is Bill Gates, and that's a string, I can also have a 1 because 1 could be a string or a number. It's perfectly acceptable to have 1 be a string. All right, so here's the steps. To do this, first you have to find the number of columns. So you inject this one /union select null -- that because null is a good number. It's just be an empty string or it'll fit any data type. Null is an acceptable value for any data type. An empty entry in a cell. So I select a null, select 2 nulls, select 3 nulls, try this until I no longer get an error, and now I know how many columns there are. Then I have 2. So here's the one. If I select a null, I get an answer. If I select 2 nulls, I'll just get that error message we saw before. So now you have to find a column with a string in it. So you can steal data and put it in there. So try putting an A in each place and see if the query succeeds. Now that you know how many nulls there are, see if you have a column that is a string. A string is what you want because you can put any kind of data in a column that's a string. All right. Oh, and I've already somehow lost track. Okay. Right. And then you can find anything you like. So if you want to know what database version, you could put that in, and that will appear telling you. So here's union select add version, and there it tells you what version of the database it is. MySQL running on Ubuntu. One thing I thought was kind of funny when I read this chapter, this textbook years ago, in 2013, I found this college in San Francisco, and they just had a SQL injection. This whole thing was like in a Russian forum. I just found this whole thing all set to go. If you just resolve this with union select right up here in the URL, it was PHP -1% union select 1 group, all this jazz. It would just pump right out the name of the administrator user and the password. But that password was a hash, and I was never able to crack that hash. And I told them, and they just didn't care. But as happened with a whole lot of colleges I notified of these vulnerabilities, I think they never understood my report or did anything, but eventually they just updated their website anyway, and it went away. All right, so Microsoft SQL, here's an example. So if you search for name equals Matthew, you get the name and the email of this person. Now, you got to find the number of columns, so you try injecting null, and then you get this error that you don't have the right number of columns, so you have to keep adding more nulls, and it turns out you have to add 5 nulls, and when it no longer get the error, you'll now get 2 columns, the existing Matthew, and then you'll get empty, empty. Those are some of the nulls. So the query is fetching 5 things, but only 2 of them are appearing here. The others are not displayed. They must be used somewhere else. So now you want to find a string, so you put in A and 4 nulls, and the A comes through, so now you know this column is a string. So now you can now union select table name comma column name. Now one step they skipped here is this is also a string. They didn't bother to prove it, but logically maybe they should have done AA null 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 and show that that works. Both of these are in fact strings, although that's pretty obvious anyway. You can see they're holding string data. So now you can select table name and column name. null, null, null from information schema columns, and now you get a list of all the tables and all the columns. So that's useful. And now that you know where the goodies are, like username and password, you can now select username and password, and you know the name of the table is users. So now you get everybody's username and password. So that's the trick. And this is, of course, this not blind SQL injection, but the kind of SQL injection where you can see some of the data that's being fetched. All right. So let's take a look at a Kahoot for that stuff, which is here. 9A, right there. Oh, this t-shirt is from Grim Security. I remember the name of the company. Very good company. Do a lot of good security research and have a free conference every quarter. All right, that might be enough. I'll wait a little bit longer. All right. All right. How do you combine two queries together? That's union. Good. All right, what do you learn from a query like that? Yep, if this succeeds, there's only two columns. If it has an error message, then there's some other number other than two columns. All right? All right, so what's the free open source database? MySQL, which I think is now owned by Oracle, but still free, and people got nervous and they made the copy MariaDB to be the free one, I think. But anyway, they're essentially the same thing, and it's free and open source. All right, so if this injection succeeds, what have you learned? Yep, the second column is a string, so the A can go in there. All right. All right. All right. Repeat winners. And they're all repeat winners. I think, assuming that's Judy. If that's Jordan, you'll have to tell me. Oh, it is. Okay, well, that's all right. All right, so let me stop this recording.